Hello, my dear friends. How are you? I'm Mario Theriger, and here I am to keep you company with another video. And for the haters, yes, I'm still alive. Just kidding. But I am alive, as a matter of fact. I feel alive. Well then, today will be another video with some loose information, again, more of a talk. But you actually seem to like these sort of videos, apparently, or so the comments and the views tell me, or show me in this case. Those of you who have been around here for some time, you already know that I'm passing through some very confusing times these past 2 months or so. Well, so instead of throwing it all away, I'm doing these videos more relaxed, no hurries, just a talk. And you seem to like stuff concerning witchcraft, you kinky little devils. Well now, before we start, I would like to share something with you. I'm not exactly sure how to say this without sounding completely mental, but I am worried. I am worried about all of us and the coming years. To be more precise, it's about next year, 2024, until 2026. I'm not one to share the more spiritual and, let's say, personal supernatural experiences and such, as you know it, but sometimes there are really strong visions, dreams, events in realms where my consciousness experiences other things, right? Let's put it in those terms. However, there are some experiences that I feel like it would be perhaps selfish and wrong of me not to share. Such things are never quite clear, mind you, and I'm not worried if people believe me or not, because that's not what I'm asking here or worried about. That's not the point. I'm worried about all of us and this world. So, in early August 2023, I have had what some would perhaps call premonitions. Again, these things are never quite clear. You see, it seems to me that 2024 will be a especially hard year if we do not prepare our own selves for what's to come. I have absolutely no idea what's to come. What I know, what I have experienced, is that there's still time for us to work on our inner shadows, work on our inner child as well, to do the shadow work we must do. If anyone has postponed therapy, do it now. Take that step, work on yourselves, because we do need to step into 2024 with a lighter heart and mind. Let us try to minimize as much as possible the darkness within, all the things that trouble us and make us anxious and depressed. By doing this, 2024 will be less heavy on us who have worked on ourselves before the turn of the year. It also seems to me that 2024 will be a sort of bridge to the next 2 years, where major events will turn things upside down, or rather, there will be a new revolution of thought and action, sort of like the French Revolution, with its surely good, but also the bad aspects. But it changed things forever, and I think that's going to happen again. The year 2025 will be a continuation of a global change that will affect humanity on several levels. Again, I have absolutely no idea what will actually happen. I'm passing to you what seems to be major effects of something or a chain of events, and that is a change, because 2026 will actually be the beginning of a new cycle for humanity and for this world. 3 tough years ahead, 2024 being the bridge, and 2026 the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new era. Whatever happens, and whether you believe me or not, matters little. Maybe nothing will happen, and this is just the very fruitful imagination of mine, or some dream formed out of the anxiety I've been feeling lately. But it matters not. Just in case, work on yourselves, start your shadow work, let go of the things that are dragging you down, become much lighter in your life, flow with the cycles of this world, be patient, be compassionate, be reasonable. Don't be too hard on yourself. And finally, take those steps towards self-healing and do it now. There's still time, I think. Well, it's just that. Doesn't matter if this was just a dream. I'm not asking much, right? I'm simply asking people to work on themselves, and that's it. And these next 3 years will be more bearable, hopefully. I would feel really bad if I didn't share this, even if it's nothing. I wanted to share because what if I'm right? I know this is strange talk, that I completely understand you. It's perfectly natural, and I'm not being cryptic on purpose. This is simply what I have experienced, and I'm worried about our future. And as you can see, I'm quite nervous about it. Even if such things are never quite clear, they are quite vivid, and information is passed down and is retained in memory. So there you have. Take care of yourselves, and we shall see. Whatever happens, happens. Pass on the message just in case. Now, that will put you on the mood. My dear friends, let's get started, if you please. Crossroads, quite the interesting concept we hear so much about in terms of witchcraft, magic, and sorcery. A physical place where paths meet. The center, the point where all things converge and merge together. To many, when speaking of crossroads, we immediately think about the goddess Hecate. I'm not going to talk about such a goddess, not today anyway, not in this video. I would like to give proper attention to her in some other future video, even though in the past I have actually already made a video about her, admittedly quite sloppy on my part, that past video, but people seem to enjoy it. Well, the concept of the crossroads is often a place of meeting where one takes the opportunity to do magic, being aided by the spirits that meet in such a place or are called upon to meet us in there. Old gods, wandering spirits, the shades of the dead, the devil itself. It is a place where entities other than human persons may aid the one who practices witchcraft. Taking into account the old lore on traditional folk magic, it is a gathering place where witches make a pact with the devil in order to do magic and become their servants. Although it must be stated here that the pact with the devil is something rather late in the lore, mythology, and folklore concerning witchcraft. I've already made a video concerning the pact with the devil, Pactum cum Diablo, an academic approach, that one with bibliography at the end of that video, so you can check it. Also, perhaps a subject for another time, but it is worth mentioning, the devil in witchcraft came to replace several entities with whom witches created relationships in order to acquire magical power or contact with certain entities that gave them power or initiated them into a specific path or craft. Sorry, there was someone at the door. Where were we? Ah, yes. Sorry. In several ancient religions, and we notice that as well within societies where shamanism plays an important spiritual and religious role, spirits of many kinds were responsible for aiding the magician, the sorcerer, the shaman, the witch in their own magical and spiritual endeavors. An exchange, bargain with, reasoning with, creating a bond, a relationship with powerful spirits, right? It's actually curious to notice that it seems the idea of the pact with the devil is almost exclusively a post-Christian idea, as instead pre-Christian belief systems usually point to the same pattern, and that is the spirits of the ancestors, some deity, and or familiar spirits, creating a mutual relation of respect towards a beneficial exertion, whilst the idea of diabolism speaks of witches obtaining their powers from a pact with the devil. Still, I don't think we should immediately dismiss the idea of the pact, even if most of it seems to be a post-Christian conception. It seems to be drawn from the action of creating a relationship with some entity which initiates the person into a specific craft. As I've spoken on a previous video concerning witchcraft and expressing yet again some similarities it has with shamanism, several witches' testimonies, both old and new, and trial records, as well as shamanic initiation rituals and experiences, point to the coming of a particular figure of power or several ones that mentally and spiritually change the person, thus the person becoming more apt, more suitable, if you will, to engage with the spirits and to be successful in whatever craft that the person has been initiated into. And what I find intriguing is the motif of the crossroads as a physical place where these contacts, rituals, and initiations can take place. The crossroads as a place of meeting between the witch and the others. In several traditions, the crossroads plays the function of a meeting place, the center of all things, where humans and others cross paths. It makes us wonder if this sort of tradition only appeared when humanity came up with the idea of making roads or paths that eventually cross together, and so these meeting points outside the settlement and outside the mundane life of society became a meeting place for sorcery, magic, and witchcraft. Well, obviously, I don't think it really has to do with the crossroads itself, but rather a place that is thought to be the center of something, a place of meeting. We have cases where people were hanged in specific places where other people, the living from different directions, would come together or pass through, and the hanged served as a warning. As such places became meeting places for all sorts of magical workings dealing with the dead, mostly the hanged. We have the case of the Odinic cult towards the dead, where the dead were hanged precisely, or the case of the hand of glory, taking the hand of an executed criminal, and a whole ritual to obtain such an element for sorcery in the very place where the person was executed. Or the ancient Greek omphalos, the center of the Greek world, the center of religious performances, the place of ritual and offering, the navel of the world, a specific mountain deemed to be the center of the world or the very abode of the gods, which marks a specific centrality in the religious perspective or perception of the landscape, where the divine and the magical converge and everything takes place in the environment, eventually converging to the center. The tree of life, of course, the standing pole, the axis mundi, a standing stone, a gathering place for the assembly, the moot, and so on and so forth. It seems the idea was that of a perception of centrality where people meet and the focus on all the other forces, intentions, energies that are attracted to such places. Attracting the spirits of the ancestors, meeting places where the shaman communicates with the spirits, where the witch gathers with its familiars, where different tribes, clans, peoples meet to make a truce, a pact, an alliance to settle disputes. The very centrality of a religious building, a dolmen, a temple, a church, and the magical acts around such religious buildings, counterclockwise, circumambulation, evocation, invocation, summoning, you get the point. The idea is of centrality, where forces and persons meet. Eventually, the crossroads plays this fundamental role in witchcraft as a place of meeting, a place of centrality, where life and action converges. And it is this sense of being outside the settlement as well, outside the society, outside the city, outside the domains of humanity and of order, judgment, law, and even outside the official religious organisms. Outside, one steps into the wilds, into the untamed, the profane, the pagan, the free wild world populated by other than human persons. Always the idea I have actually pointed out on the previous video, mentioned before, about the witch and the shaman being on the outside, ostracized, marginalized, beyond the hedgerows, out there amongst the spirits and the wild things. The crossroads ends up having both this sense of centrality and of being a place of meeting outside the social and religious norms of human society. So it does make sense, this basic notion of going to a crossroads to meet with spirits, and the idea of the pact with the devil in such places of meeting or in a place deemed to be the center of things, which reports us back to gathering places where people exchange ideas and pass on knowledge. The idea of the pact with the devil and the drawing blood from the person that is to become a witch, thus leaving the mark as an evidence from the part of the inquisitors to accuse a person of witchcraft, may also have its origins on bonds, treaties, bargains, settlement of disputes, and drawing one's blood to settle things. This could just as well come from the idea of sacrifice and presenting one's blood as a personal identification to be recognized by the spirits, or indeed blood being the conduit to draw the attention of specific spirits, exposing one's self. Could just as well, of course, be a more brutal, self-destructive act to induce a near-death experience through blood loss. Although the specific idea of the devil or the witch's familiar spirit sucking blood from the witch seem to report to the exchange of power, or rather, transfer power to the witch through the mixture of bodily fluids, something not only more personal but also exposing one's life force and vital force, and thus the exchange of bodily fluids constitutes a bond. It's no coincidence. Many people in several cultures and different times and within specific circles exchange their blood with one another to form a pact, a bond, a union. It's a form of exposure and intimacy. In the post-Christian periods, this takes all other proportions at the crossroads, such as the sacrifice of animals. There may be in here a failure in understanding what seems to have been the true purpose of drawing out one's own blood. As I said, to expose vital force, and by exchanging bodily fluids, one transfers energy into another, thus being a ritualistic moment crucial in an initiation rite. But the whole new myths on witchcraft formed by the church may have distorted this idea, and instead creating a more macabre version of animal and human sacrifice by the witches at the crossroads to shock the population. Of course, this doesn't mean that animal sacrifice hasn't played its role in pre-Christian religions and belief systems all over. Of course it has, and it has happened. It just seems that this idea of the pact with the devil by drawing blood has much more to it, right? Intimacy created with the spirits and the transfer of vital force, transferring and exchanging part of one's identity and even spirit. In the case of shamanism, we do understand the near-death experience of a future shaman to be the creation of an intimate relationship with the spirits, in which the spirits transform the spirit body of a shaman, so the shaman may be more suitable and more adapted to the task ahead through the course of its life as a shaman. So blood, taking into consideration the ancient belief of being part of one's spiritual essence, well, it is the very fluid with which power can be transferred. And this then develops into other fields, such as the case of sexual intercourse with spirit entities, the devil itself. This other transfer of fluids through an intimate relationship, which I have already presented here on another video, precisely about shamanism, the case of the spirit spouse and the conception of the incubus and succubus. Well, animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, or drawing one's blood seem to express the offering of vital force in exchange for spirit fire, for hidden knowledge, ancestral wisdom and power. Post-medieval discussions on witchcraft will see this as selling one's soul to the devil. Curiously, after this supposed pact with the devil, it follows the idea of sexual intercourse with the devil itself, or some demon or familiar fiend. Again, this might just be a distortion of a ceremony Just as a shaman obtains a spirit spouse that aids the shaman in its work, behind the idea of sexual intercourse with the devil in witchcraft may be in fact a sort of wedding ceremony with the spirit from whom the witch gives something in exchange for power and knowledge. The crossroads, therefore, still marks the idea of centrality, a meeting place where one exchanges vital force for spirit fire, and a union is created, a marriage ceremony to consolidate the bond between human and its aiding spirit entities, a ritual performance, perhaps a lot more ceremonial and symbolic in nature, of giving one's self to the spirits that will be attached to the spirit body of the witch, and thus aid the witch in its doings, and to obtain the aid of the spirit entities in other modes of life where the spirit body of the witch performs spirit work. There is indeed a sort of pact at the center of all things, a pact between the human person and the aiding spirits, the familiar spirits, the tutelary spirits. This pact allows the witch and the spirit or spirits with whom the witch created an intimate bond to work together for common goals, but also an act of loyalty to conceal the work and keep it in secrecy. If we take a look at animism and the case of reciprocal, respectful, and beneficial relationships with certain spirits, there's always an exchange. And just as one receives, one must also give. Often these relationships remain a secret because rules are set, there are taboos, and secrecy maintains the binding of spirits. In the old lore of traditional folk magic, witchcraft, we do see a lot of this need to keep it a secret, especially between humans, between the initiator and the initiate, to keep the power within, and to avoid such intimate relationships to be broken by those outside such a relation that, for some reason, might interfere and cause a rupture. Even the idea of keeping quiet, keep it in silence, is a form of retaining power within traditional folk magic, because speaking of it to others may diffuse its power. Just as the same way in shamanism, the shaman itself doesn't tell people that their own self is shaman or not. There's no confirmation or denial, lest speaking of it might be taken as boasting about one's power and abilities, and the spirits take away the power, and the link between shaman and its tutelary spirits is broken, and then there is death. Keeping secrets, well, it's something I have spoken of here in a previous video, the very one that started the whole White One series. It is taboo to speak of such things done in secrecy, not just because of the fear of being caught by the church, but certainly this idea of keeping secrets took other proportions and a whole other impact during witch hunts, surely, but also the passing of lore and power among people and between people and spirits was a ritualistic prerequisite for the transmission of magical power. The power to keep silent was understood as to be important to retain that power. Transferring power in an intimate ceremony, and it should indeed be kept a secret. At the center of all things, where all spirits converge, but neither the dead nor the living may speak of it, for it is a sacred bond. My dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.